Hey guys, we are ready for our next unit of study in math, and we are ready for lesson 1, which is going to be all about decimal place value. We're going to be able to extend place value patterns to decimals and practice reading and writing decimals to the thousandths. We're also going to be able to continue understanding the place value system. Now, as we're doing this, I will flip over to a site here, toytheater.com, and it has lots of different things that you can use. And I found something that might help for a good workspace while we're virtual, with tenths, hundredths, thousands, and you can write and drag onto there. So I'll refer back to this website when needed. Before we do that, let's do a little warm up. Take out your slate if you have one, or a piece of paper, and we're going to write the following numbers on that slate or piece of paper, and then identify the digits given. So we've got two different numbers here. The first one is 37,124. So first you need to write that number and then do this green part. Circle the thousands digit and underline the ones digit. So go ahead, write that number out. I'll give you a moment and then we'll check our work together. All right, so you can see that I wrote my first number, 37,000. So I see I have my 37,124. And now it says to circle the thousands digit and to underline the ones digit. So my thousands, I know I can refresh my memory, and I know my thousands place is this first one to the left of the first comma here. And so I'm going to circle the 7. And the ones digit is going to be this far one over to the right. And so I'm going to underline the 4 there. All right. So now why don't you do 59,846? 59,846. Okay. Again, I've written out my number. I've got 59,846. So we're supposed to circle the tens digit and underline the hundreds. So I knew that this one was the ones, and I know the tens is right to the left of it. So the 4 in this one would be a tens. And then the hundreds digit would right be to the left of that. And we're going to underline the tens, or the hundreds, sorry. So we've circled the tens and underlined the hundreds. Just a refresher, reminder that this is the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. And if we kept going, we would go 100,000s, and then we would get into the millions. Couple words that we want to review connecting to decimal. We've got the word decimal, and then we've got the word decimal point. So a decimal is a number written in standard base 10 notation that contains a decimal point, such as 2.54 or 2 and 54 hundredths. A whole number is a decimal, but is usually written without a decimal point. So like 5, we would have the whole number of 5. That can be a decimal because we can write it just as 5, or we can write it as 5.0. Okay, this would be spoken as 5 and 0 tenths, or just 5. And the decimal point is that little dot right there, a dot used to separate the ones and the tenths place. And if you noticed, when I said this number right here, and I said 5.0 or 5 and 0 tenths, I said 2 and 54 hundredths. The decimal point is, when we are verbally saying this, is spoken with the word and. That tells us there's more. And that also is why back when in the mental math, the warm-up, notice we did not have the word and, because there's not a decimal in these whole numbers. All right, so with decimal place value, if a small square represents 1, just in regular, we know that the rectangular strip represents, in strip B, that would represent 10. And then this one would represent 100. We know that because there are 10 squares in B, and then there are 100 in the large square. That's something that we've been doing. So 110 equals 10 squares, 10 strips equals 1 square, and 1 square equals 100 squares. Okay? So we're going to review place value patterns with whole numbers and think about how these patterns might extend to the right of the ones place. And so we know just from that warm up and from the vocab review, we know that a decimal point would go right here. And so then we would have decimals over here to the right. Over here is where we would have those decimals. Or meaning, if we connect it to our last unit of study, fractions. This is just another way to write parts of whole numbers, just parts of a number. So let's erase this and move on to the next. So when we're looking at our whole number place value, we remember that if we move from the ones to the tens, this is 10 times bigger than this. And we know the hundreds is 10 times bigger than the tens. We know that when we are moving to the left, we are multiplying by 10, the place value. So same thing here, moving from tens to the hundreds, we know 10 times 10 is 100, so it is moving 10 times. It's 10 times more. If we move the opposite way, and this should be review, if we're moving from the hundreds to the tens, we know we are dividing by 10, or we say multiplying by 1/10. Again, this should be review from the beginning of the school year. We talked about this at the very beginning. So moving from hundreds to tens is divided by 10 or times 1/10. Those both mean the exact same thing. And if we're moving from the tens to the ones, divided by 10 times 1/10. So if we think about it, if we're moving from the ones to the place value to the right of the decimal, we're still going to be dividing by 10 or multiplying by 1/10. So use that to help you in your thinking as we move along. So what would the digit 3 be worth in the ones place? So if we put a 3 right here, how much would it be worth? Well, if it's in the ones, there's 3 ones, it would be worth 3. If we put the digit 3 in the tens place, we have 3 tens or 30. If we have a 3 in the hundreds place, that would be 3 sets of 100 or 300. So remember that a digit in a given place is worth 10 times as much as it would be worth in the place to its right. And a digit in a given place is worth 1/10 of that would be worth in the place to the left. Remember, 1/10 times 1/10 is the same as divided by 10. So how might we use these patterns to label the column to the right of the ones column, or that first spot in the decimals? We want to think, what would maybe 1/10 of the small square look like? It would get smaller. How many strips would equivalent to the square below? So we've got our tens. We want to think, how many of these would fit into this? It would take 10, right? So this long is 1/10 of the big square. It is 1/10, or you would divide this by 10. That is going to help us in our thinking as we move across to the right in our place value. So remember, it takes 10 small sticks to complete one larger stick. Okay? It takes 100 small squares to complete one large square. And it takes 1,000 tiny squares to complete one large square. So when we're looking up here, this is what we would consider the tenths. This is the hundredths. And this is the thousands. They get tiny. The dark line right here, this thick, bold, dark line, is between the ones place and the tens place. This is where the decimal point is placed. It separates the whole numbers and the decimals, okay? All of these are whole, they are complete. These over here are part of a whole. The numbers to the right are the values that are less than 1. So remember, if they're less than 1, they're a part, they're a fraction, they're a decimal. So if we have this right here, we've got 3/10. So notice it's 3/10, THS at the end, 4/100ths, THS at the end of that, and 5/1000ths, THS at the end of that as well. How could you represent this number in the place value chart? So we're talking about this chart right here. Okay. So we have tenths, hundredths, thousands. This is what we would see. We read the numbers after the decimal as we would a whole number. So you ignore each of these place values until you read the entire thing. So we see here 345 as a whole number, but then we look up and see that it ends in the thousands. So this would read as 345 thousandths. And we see that there's nothing in the ones place. So we don't have to say, we could say 0 and 345 thousandths, but we don't have to for this one. We can simply say 345 thousandths. Notice you only use the word and if you are representing the decimal point. So on page 112 in your math journal, I want you to look, and there should be a place value chart, and try to place this number on your chart. You will see we have 1, so that is a whole. You have 7/100ths, and you have 8/1000ths. So putting each of those digits into the correct place value, and then we'll come back and check. So we'll pause the video, put those in, and then come back. So you'll see for that one, we have the 1 in the ones place. We have a 0 in the tenths because when we look back, they did not give us any tenths. They gave us hundredths and they gave us thousandths. So we need to put a 0 in that place. They gave us 7/100ths and they gave us 8/1000ths. So how would we say this? We would say 1 and 78/1000ths. I don't need to say a 0 for the tenths because when I simply say the number 78 and end it with thousandths, I know how to write this, and we'll get there. Okay, so when there are digits in both the whole number and the decimal places, like I've been saying, the decimal point is read as and. So we see 1.076, that is read as 1 and 70. This should be an 8. 1 and 78 thousandths. So in that same place value chart on page 112, I want you to write the following numbers there. We've got 5.16, 0.8, 2.307, and 7.090. The correct way of saying this, and I would like you to practice saying these the correct way as well on your own. We have 5 and 16/100ths, 0 and 8/10ths, or just 8/10ths, 2 and 307 thousandths, and then finally 7 and 90 thousandths. So let's practice saying a few more and writing them in that place value. Here we have 0 and 3/10ths. Next one, 0 and 82/100ths. 0 and 914 thousandths. 5 and 86 hundredths, 2 and 6 hundredths, and then finally 5 and 804 thousandths. Now, during the Google Meet, I will ask you to show me your work that you completed these, putting them into the correct place value. On page 113 now, it is your chance to use this information in the place value chart to complete the following problems. So for 1 through 4, you are to write the following decimals in words. So remember, when you see a decimal point, what word do you write for that? Hopefully you said and. So this first one, you would write out the words for 0 and 67 hundredths. Don't forget that when we are working with decimals, the tenths is THS ending, hundredths, THS ending, thousandths, THS ending. On 5 through 8, it says to write each decimal using numerals. Record them on the place value chart on page 112. Then write the value of 4 in each decimal. So for example, for number 5, you would write 4 and 8 tenths. You would write the 4 in the ones place and the 8 in the tenths place. The 4 is worth 4. And so you'll do that for 6, 7, and 8. On 9, 10, and 11, you're going to rewrite these as a fraction. So using that chart to help you. So we see 6 tenths here. So for this one, we would write a 6 over 10. So think about this one and number 11. On 12, 13, and 14, you're going to write those as a decimal. Again, using that chart to help you. So I see 2 tenths. So I know the 2 is going to be in the tenths place. So I would write 0.2. And then 15 and 16, these are a mystery number. I always like to use a slate or a piece of paper to help me write out the different things as I work through it. So write the 5 in the tenths place, 6 in the ones, 2 in the thousandths, and write a 1 in the hundredths place. And you'll see they did include a little decimal right there and a little decimal right there to help you out. So pause your video now, then come back and we'll check our work. All right, let's look at 1 through 4. So you can pause your video to check your spelling and check your writing. We're just going to read through these right now. Number 2 was 3 and 8 tenths. 3 was 3 and 622 thousandths. And number 4 was 804 thousandths. You could have also written 0 and 804 thousandths if you wanted. For 4 through 8, you can see that 6 was 0.48. The 4 was worth 4 tenths, or you could have written 0.4. You could have also written 4 over 10, the fraction 4 tenths. That would work as well. Number 7 was 0.048 because it's in the thousandth place. And the 4 is worth 4 hundredths, or 0.04. Or again, you could have written 4 over 100. And number 8, 6.408. The 4 is worth 4 tenths, or 0.4, or again, 4 over 10. I forgot to mention that as you're checking this, using a colored pencil, a crayon, a pen, a marker, something maybe that doesn't bleed through would be a good way to check your work so that you can see what you have made mistakes on. So then later on, when you are meeting with your teacher, you have specific ones that you can ask about. On 9, 10, and 11, you can see here, again, don't forget you can pause your video to take a better look at these if you need to. We have 6 tenths, 3 over 100, and 8 thousandths, or 8 over 1,000. 12 would be 0.2. Number 13 was 0.065, and 14 was 0.402. 2 tenths, 65 thousandths, 402 thousandths. 15 was 6 and 512 thousandths, or 6.512. And number 16, the mystery number, was 8 and 794 thousandths, or 8.794. That is the end of our first lesson for Unit 4, decimal place value. Again, during this lesson, we were able to extend our place value patterns to decimals and practice reading and writing decimals to thousandths, and also able to understand the place value system. So I want to go back to this before we end. This website here is Toy Theater, and it's just toytheater.com. There's lots of different activities on here that can help you. But if we look at math specifically, or you can also look at teacher tools, they have virtual manipulatives. So they have all kinds of things that can help out as you are practicing your math at home. Some of them are good for us right now. Some of them are things maybe you learned last year, the years before, but no matter what, they are good for us to use. Here you can even see fraction circles. So maybe you were struggling on that and you can move them around and work with them. I found this website recently and was excited to be able to show everybody. You can also look, so they have the math, and so they've got different activities that you can work on. They also have reading ones, obviously, that you can use to help you with your reading. They have art and music. They have puzzles. And then they have some games here for while you're at home with virtual learning. Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you. Again, that is the end of this lesson. So make sure that you've completed all of your work and you are ready to move on to your independent activity.